Good afternoon and welcome to today's information session on managing the complexities of conversion to S1000D. My name is Tammy Holter. I am the CEO of Absolute Data Group and I will be your host today in the joint webinar between Absolute Data Group and DCL, the Data Conversion Laboratory. While we are waiting for, we've probably only got about half the people have arrived this morning so far, so while we're waiting, we'll just go through a little bit of housekeeping with you. If I can have just a couple of people confirm that they can hear and see the screen okay, if you can just type that into the chat window. So interacting with us today, if you click on the orange arrow on the little panel, it will display the panel so that you can type in any questions and chat with us. And if you'd like to hide that panel, just click on the orange arrow again and it'll just minimize to a little bar that you can move out of the way of your screen. Okay, and I have confirmation that everyone is seeing and hearing everything. Fantastic. Thank you for that. So that's interacting with us today. When you leave us this afternoon, there will be an exit survey that will display on your screen. There's 3 great reasons to fill in that exit survey. It will help us improve webinars and present on topics that are important to you. One of the questions in the survey is what else you would like to hear about. You'll receive a link automatically to the recording as well within 48 hours so that you can take a look at that again or pass it around to colleagues. And from Absolute Data Group for filling in the survey, we offer a 10% discount on any S1000D training, whether that's virtual or classroom, if that's booked or taken before the 31st of May this year. In addition, DCL are also offering the opportunity for you to jump online and take a look at their assessment of your content strategy ROI. There's a scorecard up on their website and we'll display that on the last overhead PowerPoint today when we go to leave as well, so you can see where you can go to do that. Okay, so let's kick off this afternoon then. As I mentioned, Absolute Data Group are the host of the presentation here today. This particular topic has a specialty in S1000D, and ADG's interest in that is, of course, that we have S1000D technology. I don't want to spend too much time on ADG and our products, but I've just listed here the 4 key components to our S1000D solution. And for those of you who may not have heard or utilised our technology before, there's the R4I CSDB or Common Source Database, which of course is the core creation management and publishing tool for IETPs. There's the R4I Viewer, which is our royalty-free online and offline viewer for your IETPs or IETMs. We have R4I Workbench, which is our web-based S1000D authoring tool, and very popular for content contribution for subject matter experts and engineers to contribute and review content. It has a powerful component that is a workflow capability for assigning tasks as well. And R4I Binder, which is our drag and drop tool for creating manuals and handbooks to any print style based on your S1000D content. So simply log into the CSDB and you can drag and drop content to produce a book structure, or there's also an offline version if you don't have our CSDB as well. So that's a very quick brief on the core S1000D suite. We have a lot of other components, tools and utilities as well, but that's the core components that our customers use on a day-to-day basis. So moving on to our presenter today, it's our pleasure to have Mr. Nave Greenberg on board, and a little bit about our guest speaker today. Nave is the Senior Project Manager for DCL, who is a PMI certified project management professional with expertise in large-scale complex conversions. He has worked with numerous DTDs and standards over the years and specialises in conversions for Defence and the TechDoc business unit. and has been instrumental in developing DCL's DETA 2361 and 4051, S1000D and 38784 conversion software suite, so specialisation in preparing and developing conversion tools for those particular specifications, as well as working with clients to develop detailed project business rules. Nave is a member of the United States S1000D Management and Implementation Group, so the USSMG Landing Working Group, and participates in other discussion subgroups as well. He has been with DCL for over 10 years and holds a BE in Mechanical Engineering from Stony Brook University. So on that note, gives me great pleasure to hand over, and we are very excited to have him on board and to give us advice on what we should be looking for in the complexities when converting to S1000D. Okay, so handing over to you now.
Okay, thanks, Tammy. Let me just around you.
Okay, I can see your screen. You are all good to go.
Okay, thanks. Good morning or good afternoon to everyone, depending on where you are. As you heard, my name is Nave. I hope you won't find my accent too difficult to understand, and regardless, there are no refunds. So I hope you find this webinar useful. For those of you who are not familiar with DCL, we convert and organize content to create electronic documents, popular database, publish on the web, and basically get ready for tomorrow's technology. Now, DCL service helps you, as you can see, DCL serves a broad client base and spanning all industries. So let's begin. President Lincoln best expressed it when he said, if I had 8 hours to chop down a tree, I'd spend 6 sharpening my axe. Planning is crucial for the success of a project. There are many reasons why people rush into conversion with no proper planning and analysis. One major reason why conversion fails is because of the lack of planning. So how do we plan for conversion? First, you need to ask the right questions. Who are the stakeholders? Especially who is going to be the final user? Now, a stakeholder is anyone who is involved in the project, directly or indirectly. It's you, it's the management, it's the graphic team, it's the editor, XML expert, your tool provider, and the list can go on for a while. They all need to be involved and in sync. So the sooner you identify them, the sooner things will move forward. The final client is a very important stakeholder. In most cases, it's probably not going to be you. Let's say you manufacture a product and you need to convert all your documentation to S1000D. The client could be the person buying the product, which could be somebody in the service or repair department. When you convert the data, you need to have the client in mind. A non-technical person just buying the product may not need a very interactive item. However, the service person may need it. Another example is in the defense field. The client could be the soldier on the field. It could also be the training officer that needs the documentation for training purposes. Knowing who the client is will help you when scoping the project. So the next question is what is the estimated volume and what is the deadline? Your plan would obviously be different if you need to convert 100 pages or 100,000 pages. You will need to depend more on automation. You will probably need more resources if the volume is higher. You will also be able to set expectation. If you need to convert 100,000 pages and the deadline is unrealistic, you will need to know it now and not later on when it's too late. You can also set the expectation by saying that the only way this deadline can be met is if everything is tagged as a descriptive data module or if you get more resources. The danger with a tight schedule is that there's not enough room for a pilot or limited production run. You also don't have the luxury of a learning curve. The next question is, what version of S1000D to use? If for some reason you need to use HTML, you are limited to the older versions. If you want applicability, process DM, and other features, you will need to go with the newer version. Some of the version may have even known issues. For example, I believe it was version 4.0.1, there was a time where you couldn't use more than one emphasis in a paragraph. If you need to use formatting more than once in a paragraph, for example, a bold followed by an underlined word or italic word, it's not going to be possible. And also in the rare case, there could be tools that limit you to what kind of version you will go to. Now this leads us to figuring out what content management system or rendering tool should be used. Some tools may require specific attributes or tagging structure than other ones. Some tools are more expensive while others are cheaper. Some may offer you less while others offer you more. If you don't need all the bells and whistles, don't get the most expensive one. Regardless, this is still a big portion of your budget, so a lot of thought should go into choosing the right tool. The source format is a very important thing to know. Not all source data are the same. All have pros and cons. For example, if the source data is paper, you will need to take into account scanning, OCR, cleanup, and file preparation before you start converting to XML. This translates to more time and more money. However, it does allow you to manipulate, restructure, and clean the source data in a more familiar environment. I assume more people are proficient in Microsoft Word than in XML. So this could have an effect on your budget. Now, source data in electronic format will save you time. You don't need to OCR and do major cleanup, but again, not all electronic formats are the same. For example, HTML and Structure FrameMaker, in most cases, will be easier to process than InDesign and PageMaker. Electronic formats like Microsoft Word and Unstructured FrameMaker still require you to prepare the file before conversion. Paragraph styles are not always applied consistently, so you can't just blindly rely on them. For example, a title might be done as bold text and not styled as a heading style. So it looks like a title, but it's not styled as a title. So it will require some cleanup or some preparation before you convert to XML. Another example of electronic format could be HTML. You may think that HTML is easy to process, but it does have its own challenges. HTML is not always well-formed, and it's hard to tell when things start and when they end. Also, formatting is used a lot. So also over here, a title could be just represented as underlined text or bold text. In some cases, especially with HTML, we found that sometimes it's easier to bring the HTML to Word and do the cleanup before conversion. And I'm going to discuss it a little bit more in detail. And obviously budget is an important thing to know. The more you have, probably the better you are. Having the budget to make all images vectorized, it's a nice thing to have. But you may need to decide, if your budget is limited, that only IPB images will be vectorized and hotspotted. So to make sure that people are not asleep, we have a poll. If you can select the best, what best applies to your source data. So you have 5 options, but if you don't see your source data, like HTML, for example, just make a logical decision. For example, HTML is going to go with electronic, HTML, or XML.
Okay, so I'm just going to launch that poll for you. Oh, no, let me just launch that poll for you. Okay, so that's now open for everyone to pop their votes in on when they, either a project that they've got now or generally when they've worked with customers, have they come from paper? It is multi-selection, so if you've had different projects, if you may have had some have come from PDF and some have come from Word, you can select both. So we'll just give everyone, we've got 55% of the votes in there. So we'll just give everyone a little bit more time to put their votes in on what they've worked with in the past. Oh, we're up to 75%, nearly there. So we'll just give everyone a couple of seconds to pop it in. Now, we did have the, we've got a bit of a mixture on some of them, so we're getting some feedback on things like XML is a pretty common one. So obviously working from another XML structure and moving over into S1000D as well. Okay, so, and I think that's, there we go. We've got 100% of the votes in. So I'm just going to close the poll there, Nave, and share that on the screen so everyone can see it. There we go. So quite a mix-up, but interestingly, coming from legacy SGML and XML is quite a big winner, followed by PDF there. So that's actually quite interesting stats, isn't it?
Okay.
Okay, so that's the votes for that one. So let me hide that out of your way so that you can continue with your slides. Okay, you are good to go.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so let's continue. If you can ask people who did similar conversion for an advice. You may have difficulties getting the information from your competition, but there's other ways to get that information. You can join a bunch of S1000D discussion groups, and it's possible that members of that group share the same or similar challenges you have. And I also believe that in that environment, people tend to be more willing to give out information. And you can definitely attend training sessions, training classes that can help you learn about case studies or how S1000D should be implemented. It could really help you. It will help a lot if you get that information. Now you're ready to move to the next step. If possible, try to get all the source data. You can start looking for any inconsistencies and variation. The more you have, the more accurate your analysis will be. Also, get the business rule and schemas. You will need all of the. You really will need all of it during analysis. Now, project-specific rules you may not have, and if you don't have it, it should be developed in the next step. Now, this presentation doesn't really cover business rule development. Business rule development is really a subject by itself. There's definitely a lot of training courses out there that can teach you how to develop business rules.
In fact, I'll just jump in there for a second. ADG ran a session specifically on business rules, a webinar session last year, and there's a link in our webinar area to previous webinar sessions that have been recorded. So if you'd like to, get a copy of that one, that you're more than welcome to request that from our website.
Okay. So next you need to start thinking about building your team. You or someone in your team should be comfortable enough with S1000D. You do not need to be an expert, but you should start learning about the main concepts of S1000D. You can read the S1000D overview presentations that are on the web. There are obviously a lot of training courses you can attend, and they will give you a great overview of S1000D. It will definitely help you understand the main concept of the spec. Now, by understanding S1000D, you will be able to make logical decisions during analysis and business rule development. And now another issue why you need to understand the concept is that it's for QA and training. Because your data was not written to S1000D, it will probably not fit the standard, and your output will not look the same as the source data. And you will need to explain why things look differently to the QA team or to the editors and so on. Now, I promise that this is the last poll, and it's what do you think is your expertise in S1000D? And I guess you have to take it, Tammy, can you push the poll?
Yes.
The poll?
Yep, about to launch that one right now. Okay, so this one's a single selection only on what is your S1000D level or knowledge. So we've just opened that vote. Okay. We're at 75%, nearly there. Okay, just a couple more votes to come in on what level of S1000D or knowledge. There we are. Everyone has finished their vote now, so let me just close that and share that with you. Okay, so a mixture. Ooh, got a bit of a split there between knowledgeable, getting started, and first time. So a bit of a mix-up, but 18% of people are savvy. Fantastic. Okay, so I will hide that one for you so that you can continue along.
Okay. Now, the next step is to analyze your data and document your finding and conversion rules. Analysis is crucial to the success of a project. It will allow you to properly scope the project. You will find what you can and cannot do before you start spending valuable time and money. You're not going to find all the issues during analysis. However, whatever you find now will save you time later on. After analysis, you will have some understanding on how the source data is structured and what inconsistencies it has. For example, you can categorize your data into a few categories. Easy, difficult, maybe requiring reauthoring, and due to my limited vocabulary, the last category I'm going to call it junk, where the junk category is all the data that you do not really use or really have no added value. By doing so, you just save time and money because all the data you categorize as junk, you will not need to convert. If if your data was written to more than one standard, you can also categorize it according to the standard it was written to. And that could be even a webinar by itself. You can have something to the APA, you can have to the 388784. So there's more than one category. If you categorize your data before conversion begins, it will allow you to make logical decisions. For example, for the easy category, you may automate conversion as much as possible. For the difficult category, you may decide to use only descriptive data modules or convert some of the data to more complex data module, while the rest either to simple data module or reuse some of them. You will have a general idea of what data module will be used. For example, if you know you do not need to convert to complicated data module, you can plan accordingly. You can spend the time and money on other stuff. On the other hand, if you are going to use complex data modules and have no idea how to, now is the time to find out and not later on. This really leads us to the next point, SME involvement. You can safely assume you will not find an SME for minimum wage. I'm not trying to take away work from SMEs, but you should take that into account. If your budget is limited, subject matter expertise involvement is a big part of your budget, so you need to use them wisely. I already discussed a little bit about reauthoring. In some way, you do reinvent the wheel, but there are cases where the data is simply not there or structured in a way that will require you to reauthor. Knowing at the beginning that you will need reauthoring will give you enough time to prepare for it. Some of the things you may need are, for example, technical writers, maybe an SME, more time, meaning schedule to be revised. All of that is translated to possible budget modification. It might not increase your budget, but it may require you to revisit how the budget is allocated. Now, you need to have a QA plan that makes sense. Whatever you can QC using automation should be done with automation. In the long run, it will be cheaper and yield consistent results. Some checks will still need to be done manually. For example, checking the look and feel of data such as tables, figures, and maybe text flow. And I'm going to discuss it a little bit more in detail later on. The last bullet is really important. It is obvious that the more you find at the beginning, the less you need to find, the next you need to handle on later on. You will be surprised how many times people just rush into conversion and find out midway they did something wrong. Going back and fixing things manually is a big task. So how do you really quantify what's a big task? Let's say you find an issue later on in the process, and you need to go back and fix 5,000 pages. Some of the issues can be dropped emphasis tagging, for example, bold or underline. Another issue can be procedural steps done as sequential lists, or warning and caution not in the proper location, or worse, not tagged as warning and caution, but as regular text. So you think to yourself, well, it's not a big deal. It will take at most 5 minutes per page to fix this issue. Let's do it manually. But you can see how 5 minutes a page adds up to about 60 working days. Now, those 60 working days translate to money being wasted. It could also delay your schedule. And a bigger issue is the fact that your data will probably be inconsistent. Because if you tag manually for a few hours, you will probably make a mistake when you tag the same thing. Now, some of the issue can be even more time-consuming. Let's say you were supposed to tag a section as a procedural data module, and instead it was tagged as part of the section above it. And the section above it was actually mapped to a descriptive data module. Fixing it is not that simple. First, you need to separate that section and tag it as a procedural data module, which is a big task by itself. And next, any internal reference from the original descriptive data module now needs to be changed to a reference to a data module. And any reference anywhere else in the document also has to be changed to a data module, to a reference to a data module. It's not such a simple task. But the bottom line is that if there are any rules that can be implemented by automation, should be done using automation. Any human intervention in that process will lead to inconsistencies. Now, you do need to find the right balance between automation and manual QC. At this point, machine cannot understand the data like humans do. However, they can detect patterns and follow complicated rules a lot better than humans. Now, in the first bullet, you have an example of clear patterns that an automated tool can be used to convert to references. For example, the keyword figure, fig, figures, followed by a number, hyphen number, or a number period number will automatically reference. You can add the keywords to indicate multiple references, such as and, or, through. You can really get fancy and increase the database of keywords, but then you run into the risk of false reference detection. There will probably be patterns that initially you miss, or maybe are too risky or too difficult to implement. For example, in reference to the figure below, or as illustrated on previous page, there's no bulletproof way for an automated tool to be sure what figure needs to be referenced. What if there are 3 figures below, or maybe there's 6 illustration on the previous page? It's not necessarily the first figure that's hit. In the example, drawing 15.5 years shows what happens if your rule is too general. The tool may look for figure 15.5, and it's probably a safe assumption that if it was supposed to be a reference, the keyword will not be drawing, but it will be figure or fold out. The phrase C15.1 in volume 2 is also where a false reference will occur if you don't tweak the rule. You can modify the rule and say that if it follows with the keyword the volume, in manual, in TO, if it appears right after, the tool will not insert a reference. On the other hand, you may have the phrase C figure 15.1 in that case, the link is required. So let's go back to the case where it's C figure 15.1 in volume 2. Let's say you do not tweak the rule and you actually have figure 15.1 in the document. It will link to 15.1, to figure 15.1, and that's not correct. If you do not fix it, it will be a big issue when it's time to update your data. Let's say volume 2 is updated and a few new figures are added before that figure. Now it's not figure 15.1 anymore. Because it wasn't referenced to the correct figure, the figure number in your document will not be updated to the correct number. However, if you do not have figure 15.1 in your document and you try to link to it, it will not find it. And if it does insert a link with a dummy value, it will lead to validation error, and you will detect it. In the last bullet, there are two issues. First, you may need to tweak the rule to detect that 6.3.2, paragraph 6.3.2. It's not difficult to implement, but it will lead to many functions. For example, what if you have the following statement: set pressure to 6.3 psi. This 6.3 will be referenced to paragraph 6.3. It's obviously wrong. That you need to find the right balance between fully automation with the risk of false detection and automation with some manual cleanup. The last issue is the reference to steps. Steps 5 through 8 are in paragraph 6.3.2. Making an automated rule that goes to the correct step 5 through 8 is not very simple. There will probably be more than one variation. For example, follow steps 5 through 8 as discussed in paragraph 6.3.2, or repeat step 5 through 8 in repair procedure. Now, I can stay on that slide for hours, but I'll stop now and move forward. So what specifically do we need to identify before full production begins? You will need to chunk your data into data module. Your legacy data was probably not written to S1000D, so sometimes you will need to be creative. In a way, this is the first step in creating a DMRL. So let's assume that we have, and I apologize to people that are savvy in S1000D, I apologize for dumbing it down, but let's assume that you have a document with chapters and sections and paragraphs, and you start mapping them to data module. You may want to make your life easier, or maybe just too complicated to break it apart, and you map the entire chapter as a descriptive data module. This means that you tag every subsection as a level paragraph. However, in some way, it beats the purpose of going to S1000D. If you can't, you should chunk your data to the lowest possible point. It's better for sustainment and for reuse. Now, here is another situation where an entire section may be a descriptive data module. Now, the other subparagraphs will become individual data module. By doing so, you can make the decision that you will repeat section 1 as introductory text to every data module, or you can decide not to convert section 1 as a data module, and instead you can reauthor it and place the new introductory text in any appropriate data module. Now, this is obviously easily said than done, but it does prove the point that you will need to visit this at the beginning of the process before conversion starts. Now, your source might be written to more than one standard, as I said before. The process of converting different standard to S1000D could easily be a topic by itself. Standards like 40051, ATA, 3001, 38784, or 38793 all have similar and different challenges. But how do you take all of that and map it to a data module? This is why analysis and categorizing your data is so important. Now, one thing we usually do is look for data that could be reused across the source data. And here like a snapshot of a report that produced using an automated tool that we have that basically compares all the paragraphs and sees if there's any kind of duplication. In the first example, you can see that there's an exact match of the base paragraph in 3 other manuals. We can review that section and see if we can create one data module and reuse it 3 times. Now, in the second example, there isn't an exact match, but it's close enough to raise a flag and indicate the possibility of a data module. As you can see, the first paragraph discusses FD 5200, while the second paragraph is about FH 5200. In this case, you can still reuse this paragraph, but you can use applicability, one for FD 5200 and one for FH 5200. Now, another difference is that in the first paragraph it states field wells should be visually inspected, but in the second paragraph it just says field well shall be inspected. The word visually is missing. Now, it could be a typo, but even if it's not, you can still reuse this paragraph either by adding the word visually or by using applicability. And again, the whole concept of applicability and process DM and all of that, that is really a webinar by itself. Now, another item you need to deal with are missing or extra text. An example of missing text can be the preliminary requirements to a procedure. All the tools, special environments, material, all of that. An example of the extra text that does not fit S1000D could be the introductory data to procedure. For example, do the following step before the procedure steps. Now, in this example, you have paragraph 3-3 that discusses the operation of main switchboard. Now, the tag in example 1 will validate and all the data is present. It may even look similar to the source data, but obviously it's not tagged properly. It has no meaning because it's just a set of paragraphs. There are no references, and everything is just formatted by meaningless tags. If we want to tag it properly, we need to map it to a procedural data module where the operation of main switchboard is actually the title and the steps are tagged as procedural steps. You will notice that the paragraph do the following step is deleted. This is the example of the extra text that can be removed. So-called missing text, as I said before, could be the preliminary information. Required tools, personnel, and so on. Here is another example where the text is missing, but you can actually fetch it from another location. Now, this may, in some cases, this may require subject matter expert, or it may require somebody who really knows the source data to find this data, but if it happens only a few times, it will probably be quicker and cheaply to do it manually to resolve this issue. But if it occurs throughout the manual of your data, an automated solution is needed. Another option is just to reauthor the data before conversion to S1000D. Now, you may think tables should be an easy thing to handle, but it's definitely not always the case. In this example, you may decide to do the entire table as an image. Treating this as a cost table will require you actually to create 12 separate images. And it will require you also to make sure that they all display properly within each cell. Now, in this example, you can see the table, and if the source data is paper or PDF image, all you have to do is zone it as a table. But Sometimes when the source data is electronic format, like Microsoft Word, InDesign, or even FrameMaker, the tables may appear as tables, but they actually have data. Or even worse, sometimes they're separated by multiple spaces to give the appearance of a table. Now, you will need to convert these cases to physical table. That way, it'll be easier to convert them to XML. Now, it's obviously better to have your source data in electronic format, but this is just an example where it's actually introduced new issues. The issue of content tables appears when you deal really with HTML and XML when it's already tagged. And in HTML or XML, the so-called content tables are not really tagged as tables. Each row and entry is uniquely tagged. IPB is an example of such table, but S1000D does have the IPB data module, so it's all covered. Some of the content tables can be really complex, and downgrading them to a table is not always an easy task. Now, in this example, you have the PMCS tables, the Army PMCS tables. Now, they look like tables, but they're not tagged as tables. Now, as you can see, you do not have rows and entries, but you have PMCS entries that act as rows, but sometimes even the PMCS probe is act as a row. Now, remapping it to a table is possible, but it's not always an easy task. The Army did push and succeeded in having most of the content tables representing S1000D, starting issue 4.0. Now, auto-generated text applies both to the source data and converted data. If your source is HTML or XML, it's very possible that content elements such as intro, procedure, drawing, flowchart will actually flag the rendering tool to generate specific title. You will need to take that into account. In some cases, you will need to physically type in the titles. Now, here's an example. Now, if the source data was not HTML or XML, the text end of procedure could be ignored, because in S1000D, once you have a closing tag for procedural steps or data module, you know it's the end of the procedure. Now, if your source data was already in HTML, it is possible that the text is not even there, and it's just being generated by the rendering tool. You can see how the element intro, procedure, result, and obviously warning flag the rendering tool to auto-generate the appropriate text. Graphic is another item that you must take into account during planning and analysis. It's obviously cheaper if you can use the source images. If you do not have the images, you can either crop or extract them from the source data as raster images. When you start implementing more functionality, it will cost you. If you need to vectorize your images or hotspot them, it will affect your budget. If your budget is limited, you can make the decision that maybe only specific images will be hotspotted, or make the decision that nothing will be hotspotted or vectorized. It obviously depends on your budget. Now, in this slide, you have an image that you may need to use during your conversion. In an electronic format like FrameMaker or Microsoft Word, you may have easy access to the images, but in some cases, they're actually text layers that are drawn on the image. The base images are actually without the text layers. So when you export the images, these text layers are lost. Now, there are tools and ways and workarounds to export these images with the text layer, but if you only notice this when all the files are converted and you're just viewing the files, it will set you back. So moving on. A conflict with business rule is an obvious issue. You're converting data that was not written to S1000D. so there will be conflict. Now, let's say the business rules that do not allow you to put warning and cautions inside tables, and your source data has warning inside a table. Then what do? A workaround can be maybe convert the table to text, and not as a table, or take out the warning and paste them above the table, or take them out and link to them from the table, from the entry, or maybe get a waiver of the business rule. Now, the last bullet is probably what people have the most challenges with. It is a challenge to take your unstructured and sometimes meaningless data to data modules and assigning a meaningful data module code. Now, when I say meaningless, I refer to the fact that non-human cannot understand it. And by chunking your data to data module and assigning a data module code and using content tagging, you end up with intelligent data that also a non-human can understand. Now, again, assigning a data module code is a big topic, and it's definitely a separate webinar by itself. But you do need to understand your data in order to do it properly. So here is an example of an old and scrubbed DMRL that was done just for presentation purposes. Here we try to show how legacy data that does not fit S1000D is squeezed into the standards without major reauthoring. Now, this is not an ideal solution. However, if you are limited with time and budget and you must get your data to S1000D, you don't have a lot of options. Doing the conversion by simplifying the rule but still fulfilling all the business rule requirements is fine. Now, to achieve that, you need to be flexible when breaking down your document to data module. And I don't think there's anything wrong with tagging your data only with descriptive and procedural data modules. Now, getting your data to so-called like a vanilla S1000D is still better than having no structure and meaning to your data. Now, this is just to show how by assigning a data module code, you actually give meaning to your data. Without reading the content of the data module, you can know what system and breakdown the file is about simply by knowing the module identification code and the standard numbering system, or what is being discussed from the info code. So obviously, other information you can get simply by analyzing the data module code. A machine can read and understand the data module code a lot quicker and consistently than humans. So what are some of the lessons learned? Automated QC leads to more consistent and accurate results. However, it's not always the most efficient way to go. You have to find the right balance. In some cases, you still need human eyes to review the data. It applies to tables, images, text flow, or any unique rules that cannot be implemented by software. Now, everyone must agree and understand the business rule. Otherwise, it's a moving target. And conversion with a moving target is always a recipe for failure. It is very important that everything is documented. And when everything is documented, agreed on, and you follow this rule, in most cases, there should not be disagreement down the line. Now, you can have 50 people take the business rules, read them, and they may understand it differently. So that's why everything has to be documented and agreed, and everybody must understand the same way all the business rules before you start conversion. Now, you should always have a pilot or limited production run before you convert all the data. It makes your life a lot easier if you find your issues up front and not in the middle of the process. Now, analysis, without doing conversion analysis, will find a lot of issues, but when you start implementing those rules on real files and convert it and get XML files, You can see issues that you didn't even think about when you just review the data without seeing the final product. So always have a small pilot. It will definitely save a lot of time and money later on. Now, when dealing with conversion of legacy to S1000D, you do need to be flexible. You still need to be compliant to the standard, but in some cases the text is simply not there, and maybe you don't have the money to re-author it. So you need to make some concession, and obviously if you have the money, you re-author and do it all according to the book, but you do need to be flexible. And always think about sustainment. I showed an example before with all the linked scenario, and if you reference to numbered paragraphs, to figures, to tables, paragraphs, it will obviously stay referenced throughout the life of your data. This makes updates a lot easier and safer. Also, the simpler and smaller data module you create, the easier and cheaper it is to maintain them later on. It will give you also more options for reusability. The more time you invest in your initial conversion, the less time you will need to invest in the future. So I'm done. I hope I didn't put everybody to sleep.
Not at all. So in fact, we've had a few questions come in, but seeing you were on the roll, I didn't want to interrupt you. So I'm just going to go through a few of those. Now, before I do, I think we've had a couple of people sort of ask, what is a DMRL, a bit more detail on data module codes, business requirements. Now, as you've mentioned along the way, a lot of these topics are literally individual topics that you can spend a whole webinar session on. Most of the topics that people have questioned, ADG have already done webinar sessions on, so I'll just mention that again, that if you go to the webinar area of our website, we have webinars coming up, but at the bottom of that list are previous webinars that we have held on topics like data module requirements lists or DMRLs, how to break down your data module codes, what are the pieces of the code. So we've got a lot of informative sessions on those specific topics. So if anyone needs a little bit of a background on those, feel free to jump up there and grab those downloads. So now let's just take a look at some of the questions that have come in. So one of the first ones was, do you have any tools recommended for people to utilize to do the actual analysis? Now, I imagine it probably depends a little bit on where your data is. So is it in Microsoft Word or FrameMaker or a PDF? But how would you recommend they approach, and are there tools that sort of assist them in doing that initial analysis of, we've got this style and it's got to be mapped to this, particular element?
I mean, I think it obviously depends on what source data you have. I mean, if your source data is in non-electronic and even PDF, it obviously requires you to find tools that you will need when you convert electronic formats. You will need to extract the data, you will need to clean it up, you will need to style it, you will need to prepare it for conversion. But the benefit is that you can really do, and it's not reauthoring, but you can prepare your file a lot easier if your data was already in electronic format. I think that so if your source is paper or HTML, first of all, look for those tools that will extract your data in high accuracy, and once you're done with that, and you obviously going to end up with, let's say, Microsoft Word, there are tools out there that, in theory, and you can just go on the internet and look for them, but there's really tools out there that supposedly once you style a document and you can map it to S1000D, that's a little dangerous, because, again, if you had data that was written to S1000D and you have one-to-one mapping, that's great. And then you say, okay, I'm taking that tool that says every time I see a title, it will extract all the titles to a spreadsheet, which kind of represents a DMRL, and according to what it says, you will know what kind of info code and what system it is. But there's some phases that machine cannot do. And you do need human intervention to do them, like assigning the data module codes and doing the physical analysis. Now, because you go in and you're taking your data from, I'm calling it dumb data, but it's not. But if you take your data that was not tagged with meaning and you try to bring it to S1000D, which brings meaning to and intelligence to the data, you need to do a lot of work up front. So there's no magic solution or magic tool. I would suggest that if your source is electronic, try to find a way how to extract all the titles to a database and map it. And I mean, we have tools like that. People have tools like that. I mean, you know, there's definitely no magic solution that you push a button and you get XML. And you get
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's what people hope for, but it does just take a bit of time and effort, doesn't it? Yeah. In fact, we've got a script that we use for customers that have FrameMaker files, and you know, we can run it across an entire directory or directories full of FrameMaker documents, and it will tell us every single style that is used in all of the files. And just by having that little utility, it gives us a list of, okay, now let's go into some documents and see how they use that style and have they used it consistently, so that, you know, you can map out, okay, well, that style should become this particular element. So, so you're right. There's no all-encompassing win, is there? Okay, now.
Yeah, but again, it also sorry.
You go on.
No, I decided there's not going to be enough for other questions. It was just that's a continuation of what I said. But we can go to the next question.
Okay, this one was about the PowerPoint slide that you mentioned about it can take sort of up to like 60 days to fix after. So what sort of time are we talking to fix it before? So obviously, you know, you've mentioned a couple of times there that it's good to do cleanup up front, and if possible, you know, double check how people are doing things, style them consistently, you know, to assist with the conversion. So are you saying, you know, in all cases, pre-cleaning is always the best way to go?
I mean, definitely preparing your file to conversion, that's critical. But as I said before, even if you don't do it and you're limited with time and you don't do it the way you should do it, that's why a pilot or limited production run is a must. If you don't do a pilot or limited production run, you shoot yourself in the foot. It's really something that has to be done, because if you messed up, you will find it when you convert when you do your pilot. But let's say you have you were talking about styles, and you know that every title has to be styled with heading 1, heading 2, or whatever, and then you extract all your titles, and you suddenly see that one title 13.1, and then suddenly after that you have 13.7. Something is wrong. And you can go and check, and you could see that 13.2 until 13.6 were not done as style. They were done as paragraphs that looked like title. So that's why the analysis, the more you do up front, and to make your file consistent, you can, now again, when I said nothing, there's no 100% automation, there's no 100% automation from the beginning to final S1000D. But there are phases, but there are 100% automation. So, and again, sorry, I think not 100% automation, but that there are no human intervention from point A to point B. And some of it could be like, let's say once you standardize your document and you know that all your your entire heading styles are done properly, you know, and you can make the assumption that each one of them will be either a data module or some sort of a title. So you can extract all of them, knowing safely that you have the titles extracted, and you can map them to a data module codes, or maybe they're going to be just, you know, like nested title paragraphs and so on. But we spend a lot of time in cleanup before we do conversion. And as I said before, it's a lot easier to clean your data in Microsoft Word than in XML. The resources are cheaper. You can find abundance of people that know Microsoft Word. When you start dealing with XML, the resources are going to cost a little bit more.
Fantastic. Okay, and another question was, should you consider, so if you mentioned, often people will have a sort of mixture of documents potentially from different standards or specs as well, and some could be quite simple and short documents and some are long. Do you generally recommend having a mix-up of for your pilot, doing a combination of simple, complex, making sure you've at least got tables and graphics? Do you tend to go for short documents, long documents? What's the recommendation when you go for that pilot phase first up?
Okay, it definitely has to be representative sample. So actually, because you're going to data module, you can actually take sections of documents. You don't have, let's say you have technical manuals, you don't have to convert the entire technical manual unless you have references that go outside and you want it. But obviously the ones that are more complicated, like let's say you decide that you know ahead of time that some of the section will go to descriptive data module. Those ones are not as crucial to convert as more complex data module. When you start dealing with process DM or wiring, that's the one that you really need to investigate and do a lot of testing before you do that. Now, let's say you have only 3 pages, go ahead and do it manually. You're not going to spend a week to develop software just to convert 2 pages. So it has to be representative. And if you have more than one source, then obviously, if you have paper and Word, you can take the source that is paper because at some point it's going to get to Word anyway when you extract data. So as long as you have a representative sampling, that's the way to go.
Beautiful. Okay, great. And last question. I know that people are going to have to start running out soon. So someone asked the question, when it comes to MIL Standard 4051-2, that's already in XML, are there pre-packaged conversion tools? Are there converters basically for that particular MIL standard available? Or do you, and even in-house at DCL, have kind of pre-built and configured tools for that?
Yeah, I mean, again, the 40,051 is already in work package format, but so in theory, if you make the assumption that, okay, a work package is always a data module, you save yourself a lot of time, but you still have the complexity of assigning a data module code to it. And a lot of time, the work packages, and they did some mapping. 40,051 is actually the standard that has a lot of content tables. So you need to dumb down the content table to a cows table. So again, you're in a better situation because it is sort of mappable, and there is a way to convert it to, I don't want to call it vanilla S1000D, but if you say, okay, I'm only using descriptive and procedural, yes, we can probably do it as automated as possible.
Mm-hmm. But like you said, there's still that.
And again,
still that thought up front, isn't there, on, are work packages becoming data modules, or, what are we, there's still some decisions to be made, isn't there, some analysis to be done. Yeah. Okay, yes. Fantastic. Yes. Well, I think we've certainly had the opportunity to go through a good set of questions. If we didn't get to anyone's questions there today, please feel free. I've placed up on the screen there the email addresses for both of us, so feel free to shoot us any questions after the session, or as we exit, the exit survey will come up so that you do have the ability to be able to pop in any questions in the exit survey as well. And as I mentioned, we have indicated in the exit survey that if there is a particular area that you would like us to focus on for the next webinar, please pop the details in there, and we'll see if we can run a session just specifically for that topic. As mentioned, we do have the benefits for completing that exit survey, and the fourth item on the list there is just a special item that DCL wanted to highlight to you, which is that assessing your content strategy ROI. So if you wanted to go to that link, which is up on the DCL or dclab.com resources area, rate your content strategy scorecard. Well, thank you everyone for attending the session with us today. It's been very informative for me, so I hope everyone enjoyed the session, and we look forward to seeing you all at the next one. Thank you, folks.